coffee first," I informed Oscar as I limped into the kitchen. "Then I'll feed you." Oscar let out an impatient meow as he sat next to his food dish, his tail wrapping around his paws. "I promise you won't die of starvation," I said as I dumped old coffee grounds into my composting bucket. Oscar didn't look convinced. It had been almost 2 weeks since the night I freed Zelda and escaped from the Church of the Forgotten. Physically, I wasn't doing too badly. My ankle had healed enough to no longer require crutches, I had gained some much-needed weight, and most of the color had returned to my face. I was still suffering from headaches, but ibuprofen took most of the edge off the pain. The doctor said my brain was healing nicely, so I needn't worry about it. My mental health, however, was a completely different story. Every morning I woke from nightmares I could barely recall, covered in sweat and tangled up in my sheets. In those moments, I was sure that whatever dark presence I felt at the Church of the Forgotten had followed me home and was now residing in my room, watching me, waiting for me to drop my guard so it could pounce and devour me with its sharp, shiny teeth. In fact, being in my room at all was hard to bear. I was constantly eyeing every shadow, trying to discern any movement and listening for any and every sound, including the soft inhale or exhale of breath. I knew I was being irrational, but it didn't matter. Regardless of every effort I made to do so, I couldn't convince myself that there was no entity in my room, that it was just a figment of my imagination. Even after retreating to the comfort of my kitchen to make coffee and feed Oscar, I was never able to shake the feeling of being watched. Then there were the anxiety attacks that hit me at odd moments throughout the day. I had one at the grocery store 2 days ago and wasn't even able to finish my shopping. Daphne had to come fetch me from the parking lot, where I sat trembling uncontrollably. She drove me home and finished my shopping for me before she and Aiden brought my car home for me. I don't know what I would have done without her. Chrissy was in school all day and still worked part-time at Aunt May's diner. But even if she had been available, I wouldn't have wanted to saddle her with what I was going through. She was a teenager who needed to enjoy her last year in high school, not babysit her hot mess of a stepmother. She had already been through more than most kids her age. She didn't need any more struggles. And Mia, well, she wasn't in any better shape than me. Physically, she looked great. Her bruises had healed, and she was no longer a bag of skin and bones. But she wasn't the same. She was much quieter now, her attention often sliding away, even in the middle of the conversation. I would often see her gazing at the wall, a glazed look in her eyes, as she wrestled with whatever demons haunted her. Even though she was now staying in what used to be my office, I knew she wasn't sleeping any better than I was. When I padded by her room before the sun even approached the horizon, I could hear her pacing. Sometimes I would find her in the kitchen, waiting impatiently for the coffee to perk. We never talked about it, never discussed our nightmares or the things that haunted us. Instead, we simply allowed each other to muddle through it on our own. I didn't know if that was the right decision or not. "Morning." I turned to see Chrissy shuffle into the kitchen, still yawning. She was dressed in tight jeans and a hot pink long-sleeved shirt that perfectly matched the stripe of color in her raven black hair. "You're up early," I said, opening the cupboard to pull out a second mug. Chrissy grimaced. "Biology test today, which I'm not ready for. Ugh." She flipped a few strands of her dark hair out of her eyes and accepted the mug. I offered her a sympathetic look as she prepared her coffee, doctoring it with a liberal amount of cream and sugar. Science was never one of my strong suits. Or math. Chrissy groaned as she took a sip. "Don't remind me. Algebra test is next week, and I'm nowhere near ready for that either." I winced. "Oh, yikes. Sorry to hear that." Chrissy rolled her eyes as she continued to drink. "Do you want me to make you breakfast?" I asked, even though I knew she wasn't much of a breakfast person.